From VOA Learning English, this is the Technology Report. The war in the Gaza Strip is being fought as much on the internet as it is on the ground. Some people say the increased use of social media is changing the way people look at the conflict. Palestinian activists recently put a video on the YouTube website. The video shows rescue workers trying to help a Palestinian boy look for his family. Suddenly, the boy is seen lying on the ground. The video claims he was shot by Israeli gunmen. A second bullet appears to kill him. The video was shared on social media. Palestinians and Israelis have fought before, but now Palestinians are telling their war stories directly to the world through social media. Lisa Goldman is with the New America Foundation, a nonprofit group. She says Israelis have used Twitter for a long time. She says Palestinians on Twitter is a much more recent event. Youssef Munir heads the Jerusalem Fund, a pro-Palestinian group. He says that earlier news reports about the Middle East were generally pro-Israel. But he says active social media work by Palestinians is changing how traditional media report the news. The Israeli government understands the power of this new technology. Jed Shine is the social media director at Israel's embassy in Washington. He warns against thinking that social media truly show how the public feels about issues. There is little scientific evidence to prove how effective social media is in reporting about the conflict between Israel and Gaza. Lisa Goldman says it is important to have news media professionals report from conflict areas. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
This is the VOA Special English Technology Report. The modern way to collect signatures on a petition requires no paper or pen or standing on a street for hours. Change.org and other websites let people start or sign online petitions. There are many different reasons why people start petitions at change.org. The top causes range from animal protection to criminal justice to women's rights. Lauren Todd of New York started a petition a few months ago after she saw a picture of a girl's shirt on Facebook. The shirt read, "I'm too pretty to do homework, so my brother has to do it for me." As Ms. Todd told CBS television, it was outrageous enough to be posted on Facebook, but it was actually more outrageous than that. And I felt like I needed to do something about it. Her petition urged shoppers to boycott JCPenney stores until they stopped selling shirts with what she called sexist messages. 5 hours later, Shelby Knox started tweeting about the petition to her thousands of Twitter followers. Ms. Knox is the director of women's rights organizing forchange.org. Some of her followers also started tweeting about the shirt and signing the petition. Ms. Knox says, from the time that Lauren started the petition on change.org and JCPenney pulled the shirt, it was about 10 hours, in which it got over 2,000 signatures, and at one point was generating over 400 tweets a minute. She said that with each new signature, an email automatically went to JCPenney's public relations team. Another went to the company's chief. JCPenney, without comment, discontinued the shirts. Clothing designer John Noon has worked with a number of large stores. He says he has always used words like pretty or princess when he creates shirts for girls. It's easier to sell a shirt that says, "My little princess," than "my A student," he says. But now, with the internet, consumers who take offense can do more than just write an angry letter to the company. Another clothing seller, Forever 21, got in trouble not long after JCPenney. Forever 21 was selling a girl's shirt that read, "Allergic to algebra." It stopped selling them the day after the story spread. Robin Sacken is a professor at New York's Fashion Institute of Technology. She says children are influenced by their parents, not the words on a shirt. So if my child says to me, "Mommy, I want to get that," I've said, "Okay, you can have it, but just remember something. I don't care if you're pretty. You're doing your homework." For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Presutti. Special English Technology Report. Benjamin Stassen took his own life in 2010. His parents thought their 21-year-old son was happy. Since his suicide, they have attempted to learn why he killed himself. Alice and Jay Stassen thought Benjamin's Facebook account might hold clues to his suicide. But the account does not belong to them, nor did it belong to their son. Facebook owns everything in his account. That is what the company says in its user agreement. Jay Stassen says he found it difficult even to communicate with Facebook. If you search on the homepage of Facebook for an email address, a mailing address, a phone number, or a contact person to help, he says, you will find little information. A court ordered the company to let the Stassens see their son's account, but Facebook has yet to obey the order. 34-year-old Mac Tonys died in his sleep in 2009. He left behind a lot of online friends, many of whom liked his futuristic blog, Post-Human Blues. Work on the blog stopped when he died. A short time later, the comments area was filled with unwanted advertising. That angered his friend, Dia Sobin. He said the advertising, or spam, dishonored his friend. Lawyer John Boucher stays informed about digital rights and the law. But he admits that he and his wife have signed many user agreements without reading them. He says he would not know how to get information from his wife's accounts if she dies. Mr. Boucher says he thinks that laws will be written over time to deal with these situations, but it will take a long time to be accepted by the states. Some businesses now are offering people a way to control what happens to their online information after they die. One way to do this is to place your online accounts and passwords in a digital storage area. You give the owners of the area orders about which information to destroy and which to give others when you die. Mark Plattner was one of Mac Tony's friends. He recently used a program called SiteSucker to download Mac's blog. He then uploaded a copy of the blog to a new website under his control. Mark Plattner says we should all plan our own digital legacy. He says, don't be passive. Get to work on your online afterlife now. And that's the VOA Special English Technology Report. You can leave comments about this story at voaspecialenglish.com.
This is the VOA Special English Technology Report. Today, we continue our report on efforts by the Obama administration to increase internet freedom around the world. Alec Ross, a senior advisor to Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, recently discussed these projects with VOA's Persian News Network. He says, we're spending this money so that values that are centuries old, that go to things like the freedom of expression, the freedom of the press, and the freedom to organize, are available in the digital age. The New York Times reported that the State Department expects to have spent about $70 million on these efforts by the end of this year. Alec Ross says one project involves a so-called panic button. People could use it to quickly remove a list of contacts from a phone or computer. He says what's happening right now is people are being arrested and they are being forced to hand over their passwords a lot of the times for their social media accounts. Freedom House, an organization in Washington, released a Freedom on the Net report in April. The group studied 37 countries. It found that 23 of them had arrested internet users for content posted online. 19 of the countries at least partially controlled international connections to the internet, and at least 12 had interfered with networks, listened in on people's communications, or taken down websites. Iran has one of the most extensive systems of online censorship. The Iranian government controls all internet entry points into the country. Iran has also announced plans to build its own national internet. But the Wall Street Journal reported last month that few people think Iran could completely cut its links to the wider internet. The newspaper said Iran could move toward a system of two internets like a few other countries. Ken Berman leads anti-censorship projects for the Broadcasting Board of Governors, the parent agency of VOA. He says China is considering the same thing, of basically having a closed system that would be hard for outside information to get in on. Alec Ross at the State Department says the global community should respond wherever freedom of expression is under attack. Sometimes that is in countries that have more closed information environments. But oftentimes, frankly, it's in countries where the United States has friendly relationships with their governments, but where we have differences of opinions about how open an information environment should be. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Technology Report. Builders in developing countries are often not required to build strong buildings. So, when a disaster strikes, the damage is often widespread. Yet Japan is one of the most developed countries in the world. Still, the March 11th earthquake and tsunami waves destroyed more than 14,000 buildings. Brady Cox is an assistant professor of civil engineering at the University of Arkansas. He is also an earthquake expert with an organization called Geotechnical Extreme Events Reconnaissance, or GEAR. The group studies major disasters. Professor Cox says Japan has one of the best building code systems in the world. However, he says, this earthquake was huge, one of the top 5 earthquakes in recorded history. So anytime there is an earthquake that large, there is going to be damage. The quake measured magnitude 9. He says one thing many people don't understand is that building codes are meant to prevent loss of life in earthquakes. That doesn't mean that the buildings won't have major damage. Mr. Cox says Japan has invested a lot in seismic research and design since a magnitude 7.5 earthquake in Niigata in 1964. That same year, a 9.2 quake shook the American state of Alaska. He says those 2 earthquakes opened up a lot of new research on something called soil liquefaction. Soil liquefaction is the process by which the strength or stiffness of soil is weakened by an event like the shaking of an earthquake. The soil begins to move like liquid. Professor Cox says the first step to designing an earthquake-resistant building is to study the soil. Then, the structural engineers take that information and decide the details of the construction, such as, is this going to be a steel structure? Is it going to be reinforced concrete? How will the framing of the building be designed? A team from Geotechnical Extreme Events Reconnaissance is going to Japan to examine the destruction. Mr. Cox says they will also be working on rebuilding efforts. They want to make sure that schools, hospitals, police and fire stations, and government buildings are rebuilt well. Mr. Cox and other members of GEAR went to Haiti after the powerful earthquake last year and continue to work with Haitian officials. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
This is the VOA Special English Development Report. A new study says the leading cause of disability in older people in low and middle income countries is dementia. The researchers disagree with the World Health Organization, which says blindness and other vision problems are the leading cause. Dementia is a loss of intellectual ability that affects memory, learning, attention, thinking, and language skills. People with dementia may forget family members or not know what day it is. Sometimes they become angry or sad, hear voices, or see things that are not there. Renata Souza from the Institute of Psychiatry at King's College London and other researchers wrote the new report. Their study looked at the causes of disability among 15,000 people aged 65 or older in 7 countries. The countries were China, India, Cuba, the Dominican Republic, Venezuela, Mexico, and Peru. The team found that dementia was the largest cause of disability in the elderly in areas other than rural India and Venezuela. Other major causes were stroke, loss of use of arms or legs, arthritis, depression, eyesight problems, and gastrointestinal problems. In low and middle income countries, heart disease and cancer get much of the attention given to chronic diseases. The researchers say increased importance should be given to chronic diseases of the brain and mind. As populations age, societies will have to deal with more and more cases of dementia. The study says the elderly are 9% of the total population of low and middle income countries today, but their numbers are growing quickly. They are expected to reach 20% of the total population by the middle of the century. The study appeared in the Lancet Medical Journal, which published a special issue on disability. A separate study of 18 low and middle income countries dealt with children. It found that in almost half the countries, children who were not breastfed were much more likely to have a disability than those who were. The same was true of those who did not receive vitamin A supplements and those who were underweight. Children who did not take part in early learning activities or attend school were also more likely to be disabled than those who did. Researchers at the University of Wisconsin-Madison in the United States and UNICEF did the study. And that's the VOA Special English Development Report.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Technology Report. China's Tianhe-2 supercomputer has been rated #1 on the top 500, a list of the world's most powerful computers. Experts measured the supercomputer's performance at 33.86 petaflops, or quadrillions of operations per second. China's National University of Defense Technology developed the supercomputer, which runs twice as fast as the #2 rated Titan supercomputer. That machine belongs to the U.S. government's Oak Ridge National Laboratory in the southern state of Tennessee. Tianhe-2 and Titan are part of the race to make supercomputers faster and more powerful. So, what is a supercomputer? A basic personal computer has one microchip at the center of its operations. This central processing unit, or CPU, carries out a set of commands as part of a pre-designed program. The first supercomputers had a few more CPUs. The number grew as microprocessors became cheaper and faster. Andrew Grimshaw is a computer science professor at the University of Virginia. He says many supercomputers today are called parallel machines. Instead of one CPU, they have thousands. These parallel machines are made up of many individual computers called nodes. They are positioned in one block. They use a lot of power, create a lot of heat, and require huge cooling systems. They also use programs different from the ones used by ordinary computers. Professor Grimshaw says anyone with enough resources can build a supercomputer to solve problems that require millions of mathematical calculations. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Persutti.
This is the VOA Special English Development Report. Market researchers estimate that more than 1 billion personal computers are in use worldwide. Availability has improved in developing countries, but still remains limited compared to industrialized nations. Experts continue to debate how best to close this digital divide. Nicholas Negroponte established the One Laptop Per Child project in 2005. He would like to put a low-cost laptop in the hands of every child, especially those living in extreme poverty. His nonprofit organization has shipped its specially designed laptop to developing countries around the world. He says it is already in the hands of more than 1 million children in 31 countries and 19 languages. And one country, Uruguay, has just completed doing every single child in the country, he says. But the program has critics. They say trying to supply every child with a laptop, even at the current price of $160, is costly and inefficient. Stephen Ducker also makes low-cost computers, but his can run programs and applications for several students at once. He says these virtual desktops lower costs, reduce energy use, and lessen the need for technical support. His company, N Computing, says it has set up over 40,000 networks in more than 100 countries. Stephen Ducker says all you need to connect to a network is a keyboard and monitor. You think you've got your own computer all to yourself, he says. Instead, users are sharing the resource and doing it at a much lower cost than having their own PC. As computers reach more children in developing countries, so too in many cases is the internet. It can be a great educational tool. But children also need to learn about the possible threats that can be found on social networks and other sites. Mark Mutunga is with Microsoft East Africa in Kenya. He says poverty may put African children especially at risk. They are being told, hey, you know what? I can send you a few dollars. I can come and visit you. I can buy you a ticket. You come to my country. His company is working with the Kenyan government and a children's rights group. Mark Mutunga says the coalition is trying to educate the public about how to protect children from online abuse. And that's the VOA Special English Development Report, available on Twitter and Facebook at VOA Learning English.